Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It is Thursday, April. Let me say it again. Thursday. We have entered into April already. April 3rd, 2025, already past the three first months of this year. I don't know where they've gone. They have gone by so quickly. Let me apologize for being late today. Some computer glitches. One of the things I always say to myself is, I love technology until I don't. Today was a I don't, but we got to figure it out. So I am Dr. Tanji Reed Marshall. I am the CEO and principal consultant of Liaison Educational Partners. It is an honor to welcome you here with me for Let's Talk Power Live. What do we do at Liaison Educational Partners? We are an educational consultancy that supports educators at every level, state, district, school. And we also help organizations that support educational entities. What do? We really help them become who they say they are. And we do it three ways. We look at curriculum. We understand our world is highly diverse, no matter who wants that word used or not. Diverse is a scientific phenomenon. It happens whether you do anything or not. We live in a highly diverse world, and we recognize that curriculum must demonstrate and depict the wonderful humanity in ways that are accurate and ways that are expansive. So one of the things we do is we help organizations create representationally balanced curriculum so that our students can see themselves widely, broadly, deeply, and most importantly, accurately. And then we help organizations look at their instructional frameworks, and we help them build strong instructional teams so they can deliver on that curriculum. And then we do all of that by looking at the quality of the culture of an environment. We understand that school can be a trying place sometimes, and we want to make sure that every student has access to a leader and a teacher and the kinds of materials that offer the skill sets, mindsets, so that they get the excellent education that they deserve. So that is what we do here at Liaison Educational Partners, and it is a gem and joy for me to lead that. And so today, we're going to spend some time looking at and digging a little bit deeply into what we do here at Liaison Educational Partners. But I want to ask you something. Have you subscribed to our channel yet? I don't know. We're a new channel, so you may not know yet. So we're a new channel here at Liaison Educational Partners, and at Let's Talk Power Live is our channel. I want to invite you to do three things. Number one thing, subscribe. Number two thing, like. Number three thing, share. Do those three things. Help us begin to operationalize power so that students and adults thrive in this place we call school. So, going to really talk about what we're doing to what's happening in the world right now. A lot is going on. So much is going on, but I really want to just, offer you a couple of things. Have you registered? There's a question. Last couple of weeks, we've been really talking about, have you registered? Have you looked at the landscape that's happening in our world and thought, what are we going to do about this? We have the solution. The solution, or one of the solutions, is being prepared. Preparation is power right now. You can't be more prepared because the landscape is so capricious and so uncertain by design. And so to stem the tide of the way in which our brains are on a swivel and all that cortisol is coursing through our bodies, we want to make sure that we are in partnership with you all so that you don't got to worry about that, because being prepared is going to be your power tool. And then we also understand the importance of being in community. So this particular webinar, for me, it's a strategy session. I want to invite you to a strategy session where you're going to really look at what's happening And then how does it impact your particular context? We know that they're making suggestions and edicts and orders to dismantle the Department of Education, which is going to have a real impact on the way dollars are allocated and the way services are rendered. So, what better way to begin to address and stem the tide of this uncertainty than to be in community with people doing the same things you are, asking the same questions you are, and then being prepared to navigate it. So, I want to invite you to join us to be a part of this community about being prepared. There is the link right there for you to go ahead and join us. Would love to have you. And I'm going to ask you to do that thing again. I want you to register and I want you to share it. And then we want you to come. So do those three things. And then next up, going to ask you my question that I ask every week. Do you have a copy of Understanding Your Instructional Power? Curriculum and language decisions to support each student. Power is real. It is not fake. We do a lot of conversation about power. We want to shift the power dynamics. This is a book that is designed to do a couple of things. First and foremost, it helps you identify your power ideology. And we all have one. We all learned about power in a certain way. And we're going to get into that later in our time today. And then it also gives you ways to understand how how the use of power, I'll say it that way, how the use of power is really shaping the learning environment. And then, so excited, there are real actionable strategies, real actionable exercises in this book to support creating the kind of environment where adults and students thrive. So go ahead, scan that QR code. And I think I have another link up here. Let's get that link up here. Let me see. Do I have it? I don't have it up here. I'll get it for you. Oh, wait, no, we'll get it for you so that you can, if you can't scan the QR code, there are ways for you to get that. You can get it. I'll put the website up. One of the best ways to get it is go onto the website. And if you go on the website, this will give you the opportunity to get a signed copy of the book. And so go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and get into our work for today. So over the past 2 months, we have spent, it was Black History Month in February, and last month it was Women's History Month. And we spent a lot of time digging into some critical people, really important people whose use of power was so strategic and so impactful. It left, I don't want to call them breadcrumbs because breadcrumbs are like little small things. They didn't leave little small things. They left a whole blueprint that we can follow to help us understand what power is and how to use power strategically. They use power strategically. And the people that we talked about Robert Smalls. We talked about W.E.B. Du Bois. We talked about Carter. So we really began to, and Frederick Douglass, we began to dig into how those gentlemen back in February did use power to advance education across the country, particularly Robert Smalls. And then when we moved into March, we talked about some fantastic women who really shaped the way in which we understand power and how you can use power as a tool not to control, but a power as a tool to influence. We talked about Ida B. Wells. We talked about J. California Cooper and Zora Neale Hurston. We talked about Mary Church Terrell. We talked about the indomitable Dorothy Height. We talked about Mary McLeod Bethune. We talked about Margaret Walker. We talked about Constance Baker, Diane Nash. We talked about women and men who really looked at what happens when you use power. So today, our big story, we're really going to dig into this idea of instructional power. It's about, it isn't about control. It really is about shaping conditions where students and adults thrive. And I'm leaning into my book, and I'm doing that because people keep asking me, tell me about power. And when we talk about instructional power, we mean, how do adults use power to shape the learning environment? And when I talk about adults, I do mean leaders who lead districts, leaders who lead states, leaders who lead buildings, and leaders who lead classrooms. And I want to be clear, the work inside this book, the work I did to create this book, centered on a research study I did with 4 educators in the southern part of our country. And they were all at the high school level. And I was asked, well, challenge. I had a leader say, well, I read a piece of your book, and your book really centers on educators. What about leaders? And here's what I will say. If you lead a building, you have to have fine-tuned eyes and sharp ears so that you can, in fact, see how the use of power is moving through your building. Same thing if you are a district leader and if you're a state leader. Power is real. And I recently had a former colleague of mine who is now a principal of an elementary school, and they used this book as part of a book study for their entire school. And one of the things she said to me was, after reading this book, it really opened my eyes, and I see things differently. We are asking ourselves different questions. And so let's think about, what does it mean when we are understanding instructional power and how it can shift the environment? And so the first thing I want to do is I want to get a little bit nostalgic with you. If we were in person together, I'd be asking you a question. And the question I want you to consider is this: how did you learn about power? Think about that for a minute. We oftentimes don't consider how we have learned about power. We just know it exists and we move accordingly. It's this tacit agreement we make with another individual that we're going to be in this relationship where one person has more relational power, more ability to shape our decisions and to shape our behavior decisions based upon their role, meaning their position that they hold, and based upon our position. So relative to their position and our position, that creates the power dynamic. So how did you learn about that? You learned about it in a very particular way. I know how I learned about it. I learned about it. It was actually caught in my home. It was caught. It was the eye. It was the look. If we were together, I would say, raise your hand if you had a parent who all they had to do was give you the look, and you knew that you needed to straighten up and fly right. I can't tell you how many times I got the look and how many times I have given the look. But that is where I learned about power and authority. I learned about it at home, right? I learned about it through the ways in which my parents interacted with one another. My dad was clearly the authority figure in our home while he was alive. My dad passed away when I was very, very young. And after that, the dynamic shifted, right? But up until then, it was a very traditional home where, quote unquote, the man was in charge, but not in control, meaning that we were afraid and that there was fear. but we understood that there was a line and you better not cross that line. If you're laughing or giggling, that's because you're probably thinking about, oh, yeah, you know what? That was how I learned about it. And then you learned about it at school because you shifted environments. You went from home, you went to school, and then there was this other space and place where you learned about it in a different way because somebody was in charge of your behavior. Somebody had the ability to punish you, to reward you, to give you what you thought you needed. And so that relationship was really, really an important one to consider. And then also, you learned about it in your environment outside of those two areas. Maybe you were a kid who grew up in church. I grew up in church. We had very clear lines of power and authority there. Maybe you grew up going to synagogue or temple or community centers, right? But then maybe you were on sports teams or dance teams, or maybe you were in a music club or a drama club, or you were part of the painting. Anytime there are two people gathered together and one person has the ability to determine the course of action of another person, power dynamics are going to be at play. And when we were in school, because of a lot of factors, I'm going to talk about those factors in a moment, because of the factors that direct the relationship, the school environment really is ripe for the use and abuse of power. And so it really is, power does equal intentional influence. You are a person, your job gives you a type of authority. It allows you to do a certain thing. And then how you use that power intentionally is going to shape the kind of environment the people around you experience. Right now, we're talking about how the use of power influences the learning environment. There's going to be a particular way in which the learning environment shifts according to how the adults, really how the adults use power. And let's just be clear about something. And I did a session around this a while ago. I might just I'll release that again so you can see it. Students know about power. They understand about power in ways the adults don't think they do. And one of the things kids know about power is they know when it is uneven. They know when the adults are allowing certain children more latitude than others. They are very keen on that. But the intentional use of power is about how do you use your relationships with your students, whether you are the principal, whether you are a district person, or maybe you're a state person who has allowed yourself the opportunity to get into your schools. No matter where you are on this line between adults and kids, no matter where you are, you have to be able to demonstrate your willingness to open the space up so that students are with you and that they're partners with you in this process. So that means you have to know what your own power ideology is. You have to be willing to recognize that you have power and that how you use it is an influencing factor on the relationship and on the learning environment. The worst thing an adult can do is to pretend that they don't have power. They've got power and they use power over and over and over again. And it's really important that we really acknowledge that there is this use of power and you have to be intentional with it. And so want you to think about your own power history. I gave you a little bit of mine, and I showed you that you learn about power in three critical places. Your home is the first line of defense. And I don't even want to call it defense. It's just the first place where you learn about it. It's just, that's your first understanding that there are people whose own ideas, desires, wants, needs direct your behavior and action. They direct how you speak, they direct whether or not you speak. So at home, you begin to suss out this idea of power. And then you go to this place called school and you learn about power in a more dynamic way because you get in contact with other young people who have learned about power in their home, and it's different than the way you learned about power in your home. So you are together in this very dynamic, rich place where people are coming together and they are exercising and using what they have learned about power and authority, and they're shaping the environment moment by moment by moment. And if you are in other environments, like I gave some examples earlier, maybe you're in a church, a religious environment. I was in a church environment. Maybe you are in a culture club environment. Maybe you are in a sport environment or theater, arts, any other kind of environment where 2 or 3 people are gathered, power is there. Dr. Beverly Tatum says, power is the smog in the air, and it directs the dynamics of every relationship that you're in. And so there is power about strategic positioning, right? There's really this need to understand that when power is being used, young people and the adults too, but young people are experiencing one of these 4. The environment is either empowering to them, it is either agentic or agentive to them, for them. It is either protective, meaning there's a dynamic of power protection, usually at the adult level. And when children respond to that, it creates a situation that we'll talk about in the future. Or it is dimension 4, it is disenfranchising. So one of these 4 dimensions is a direct result, a direct outcome of how young people and the adults too are experiencing the learning environment. Unfortunately, far too many students are experiencing this dimension 4. It is a disenfranchising environment. Well, what does that mean? That means that the environment is adult-centered. It is characterized by force, by fear, punitive learning. It is very rule-driven. It is harmful to most students, particularly and especially the marginalized. If you've ever been in a building where, and I'm taking this deep breath because every time I think about it, it just makes me angry. If you've been in an environment where children are being asked to walk in silent, straight, single lines, it's disenfranchising. If you've been in places where young people, particularly very young children, are asked to walk in straight, single, silent lines with their fingers over their mouths, with bubbles in their mouths, that's a signal for disenfranchisement. If you are in an environment and you go into a classroom where every single time a young person opens their mouth and their use of language is something the adult deems is broken English, that's disenfranchising. If you're in a place where rules reign, right? Everybody's held to rules and it is a zero tolerance for anything, That's a disenfranchising environment. And a lot of young people, far too many students, experience disenfranchisement. They are silenced. They are asked to shelve their identities, and they are in this place of conformity and compliance. So that is what disenfranchising looks like right now. And I want to bring this up and why this is here. We don't see things as the things are. We see things as we are, which is why I asked that question about how did you learn about power? And when there is disenfranchisement and the use of power is such that rules reign and students are silenced and identities are put on shelves, there is a mismatch between what we say we believe about power, what we say we believe about student agency, and what's actually in our history and what we have allowed to come forward explicitly. And so when you are not in tune with your own power ideology, where it comes from, how it shows up, and its influence on the quality of the environment, I guarantee you're going to get some power protecting and you're going to get disenfranchising. But I want to give you some ways to move forward with this. One of the things you want to be able to do is begin to strategically leverage your ideas, right? Strategically leverage what you know about your own power ideology and how it's showing up in the classroom, in the building, in the district, in the state. It's showing up, I promise you. So here's a tool, here's a way to think about it. You want to analyze, you want to inquire, you want to act, and you want to reflect. So right now, I want to focus on analyze. You want to read and listen to the environment. How is language used? Who gets to speak, participate, all of the things? How do students and teachers get to use language? And I focus on language because language is a critical tool in understanding belief systems. How you speak is a window into what you believe. And if you are hearing things like those kids, these kids, that is a window into some possible disenfranchisement and power protecting. So you want to be able to think critically about what's happening in the learning environment relative to this idea of analyze. How do you analyze? You take the time to sit down and ask yourselves these questions. I had a principal many years ago who used to wear very quiet shoes. And, we have to have observations, and we had our observations. She would walk into a classroom so quietly. And before you looked up, she was already there. So you couldn't hide, you couldn't fake anything. That was analysis. One of the tools I offer in the book, and one of the strategies I offer in the book, is to get a video camera, videotape yourself. I used to do that. Let me tell you something. It was crazy, but I learned a lot. Want you to take time to analyze what's happening relative to language, and how does the use of language really tell you something about the quality of the environment relative to those four dimensions. And particularly when you're thinking about whether there's some power protecting, which we're going to talk about next week, and then if there is disenfranchisement, which we have talked about this week. So I really want to think about that. So here are my questions. If you want to go deeper, you want to go ahead and get your copy of Understanding Your Instructional Power, read it for yourself, or gift it to somebody else. But I also have this understanding your instructional power tool. And here is the link right here, hot off the presses. You just might be the first one to get it. So go ahead and use this link to get this tool. And we're going to actually make it available. So if you don't have it, if you can't get it right now, we're going to make this tool available to you. And then go ahead and book a power planning call with us. And I always give you a way to connect with us. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And again, here's the QR code for the book. And also want to give you an opportunity to go ahead and use this information that's right here to book that planning call with us. And then lastly, I'm going to let me put it back up here. There it is. Remember to register and share this information so that you can join us on April 6th for a strategy session. It's a webinar, but it really is a strategy session to help you really prepare, because as I said, preparation is the superpower, and being in community with those who are engaging in this work of shaping the next iteration of what education, public free education in this country is going to look like, has to begin now, and it has to be strategic. And so I want to go ahead and invite you to do that. And then remember those 3 things I asked you to do. I want you to subscribe, I want you to like, and I want you to share this channel. And that is our session for this week. Thank you so much for being patient because I was late today, but thank you for being here. Oh yeah, what am I thankful for? I'm thankful that you're here with me. I'm thankful that it's April already and spring has sprung. Have a great rest of your week, everybody. And let's talk Power Live next week.